1950s and 60s, the CIA began work to find means for influencing human cognition, emotion, and behavior. This research has included the use of wireless directed electromagnetic energy under the heading of information warfare and non-lethal weapons. New technological capabilities have been developed in black budget projects over the last few decades, including the ability to influence human emotion, disrupt thought, and present excruciating pain through the manipulation of magnetic fields. The U.S. military and intelligence agencies have at their disposal frightful new weapons. With the signing of the Military Commission Act of 2006, the new official U.S. policy is that torture and suspension of due process are acceptable for anyone the President deems to be a terrorist or a supporter. This act is the overt denial of the inalienable rights of human beings, propagated by our Declaration of Independence and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is imperative that the human body and mind be considered sacrosanct. To invade a person's body without their consent is an egregious human rights crime. Some of the effects of electromagnetic frequency: a burning sensation akin to touching a hot skillet over your entire body. Simultaneously, you may hear terrifying, nauseating screams, which, while not produced externally, fills your brain with overwhelming thoughts of disruption and chaos. Not only are both of these phenomena currently possible, but designs for more powerful EMF technologies receive continuous funding from the U.S. government daily. Today, the combination with the political climate and the technological capabilities presents a condition in which widespread manipulation of not only the flow of information through the media, but also the manipulation of the emotional states and a cognitive ability in large populations could be achieved through the use of EMF technology. Previous human rights and cognitive liberty violations are evidenced in the archives of the CIA and FBI records. One in particular is the infamous MK Ultra program, and then also the grim records of harassment and subversion uncovered in the COINTELPRO program enforced through the 1950s and into the 1970s.
Hello, I'm V. Just kidding. Yes, I'm V. I am the host of the Red Pill Hardcore TV show and some other smaller productions. And I'm here today for the long-awaited November 5th movie. So, the most important issue to date is technology. Because let's face it, when you don't have an understanding of technology, it can control you. What you don't know absolutely has the ability to control you. You know, it's not like it's back in the days where people churned their own butter. These people who churned their own butter would actually know how the device worked, how to fix it if it ever broke, or even how to reproduce this device on their own if need be. Now, that's a lot more than we could say for ourselves. You know, you can't reproduce your cell phone. Most of you can't. And so, let's get into the technology and mind control.
Imagine a magnetic wand that could control your brain. To find out if such a thing could actually work, I offered my own brain for a test. It seemed like fun at the time.
Hold it up, you can look at it.
Psychiatrist and neurologist Mark George said he could make my thumb twitch.
Jeez, it does. Oh, that was nice.
Using a map of the brain, he can zap the area that controls a specific body part, like my toe.
Oh, wow.
Is that last joke a little too much?
A little bit. Yeah, it was a little much.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The wand can even affect someone's speech.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
And once the pulse is removed,
25, 26.
everything goes back to normal.
29, 30.
It's sort of a remarkable thing that one can put something over somebody's head and modify the way they behave.
Wow. The wand works by producing a powerful magnetic pulse.
So it doesn't look like a lot, but the magnetic field that it generates is about the strength of an MRI machine, of a very strong MRI machine.
Since electricity and magnetism are really just two forms of the same thing, a magnet can affect the electrical signals in your brain.
Now this is your brain. It's basically an electric web of billions of neurons wired together. When a strong magnetic pulse hits these neurons, it alters their electric current.
The process is called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
Electricity is the currency of the brain. All thoughts, all beliefs, all actions are just electrical impulses. And so TMS, we're actually able to get in there and influence the currency of the brain focally and non-invasively.
The stronger the magnetic pulse, the deeper into the brain it goes. And by adjusting the pattern of the pulse, you can change the way that part of the brain functions.
We can turn a part of the brain up or down or temporarily turn it off. It doesn't take a genius to see that it should be a pretty fertile way to begin to understand how the brain works.
And so we have electromagnetic influences that can be pushed into the brain. Electromagnetic signals, or, EMF, electromagnetic fields, which everything emanates. But, rather than sit here and be nerdy about this, I mean, some things just have to speak for itself. I mean, where have you seen anyone with their speech interrupted so calculated? It's like a robot. Have you ever seen that before? I have. If you haven't, well, let's check it out.
Wisconsin has officially joined 25 other states in a lawsuit against President Obama's health care reform law. Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen says Wisconsin is the latest state, including Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Ohio, and Wyoming, to join Florida's suit. The states claiming the Exorcist, Sa Antisracho, and Palais Bringritz by health urgent.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison, let's go to Terrace English for the bit, the head of the pit.
Mark McAllister, Global News. Now, Defense Minister McCain McLeod did confirm today that more than 54 18 fighter jets are spending about as much as 20 and ready to assist the 100 deployed over the amount needed. Now, it did depend that how the NOLAN remerges RN, while the university or the UN mission as whole received support from all batteries in the hues of the Garbins of today. Excuse me. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mark McAllister from Japan tonight.
předpokládat, že odpoledne pravděpodobně budeme úspěšnější. A teď se pojďme podívat na to, co přinesly poslední hodiny na české politické scéně.
To have a certain amount of distance between the bodies
exactly.
in junior high.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memory.
High.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music history.
35 years ago today, Elvis Presley passed away, the king of rock and roll, and as Mark Cohn says in his great song, Walking in Memphis, there.
Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music history.
So as you can see, when the trigger word Holy Spirit is said, he immediately freezes up and starts to be very weird. As you can see, there's no reactions. He's staring blankly into the camera as if he is completely disassociated. In the MKUltra mind control program, one of the things that they need to do is create a psychological state of disassociation. Here we see that right in front of our eyes. He's completely disassociated from reality in what's called a trance. That is part of the mind control program. It's to get the person to a point where they're in trances and they're controllable. So here she's jumping in and out of a child personality. That's one of the programs that they will put in the individual, is a child program. So here she's jumping from one personality to another because she's a victim of mind control. But the media wants you to believe that these people are either using drugs or are just psychologically breaking down. We need to be very careful. The media is here to lie to us. If you were relying on TMZ and the mainstream media to tell you the truth, you're going to get stuff like this.
Goading them, like when he just stared creepily into the camera for what seemed like eternity.
35 years ago today, Elvis Presley passed away.
Boom! He's young.
So they admit that, you know, he's staring in the camera weird. It's strange. It's a strange thing that he's doing. They admit that. But what they do is try and tell you that he's doing this not because of MKUltra mind control program that the Synagogue of Satan is administering onto individuals who want to take part in being used in the establishment of the Antichrist kingdom. No, they don't tell you that. They tell you that this is occurring because he's trying to start trouble on the set. And just nonsense. It's pretty ridiculous when you know what's really going on and you see how they try and cover themselves. So be very vigilant. The mainstream media is constantly lying to us. Okay, so this is what's going on. It's an MKUltra mind control operation that is being used by Hollywood to just keep people doing what they need them to do. It's a lot easier to control their puppets when they are literally under mind control. So they're not going to get too much objection or problems, you know, dealing with someone who can be put into a trance and used to do just about anything.
I'm sorry.
Wipe the drool.
I was in a trance.
Yeah, wipe the drool there.
Well, bad news for the Obama administration. We have this new CNN ORC poll, which is quite a turnaround in.
But voters will have the last word on Trump. Happy Media New Year. Brian Stelter, CNN, New York.
Brian, thank you so much. And for all of you on Twitter who are asking if I'm okay, thank you so much. I got a little hot and I passed out for a moment. I am fine. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I got a little hot and I passed out for a moment. I am fine.
And I figured that would never happen without the preparation we had training the team. And so I'd like it.
Second. How you feeling? How you feeling?
Boy, if that's not a little embarrassing. But so I don't get people worried standing up here too long. Think what I was going to say, and so I figure I could stand here standing enough with the training.
As much as I would like to laugh at those past few scenes, I can't, knowing what's actually going on. I mean, I guess it's time to get serious here. If you can ascertain the importance of these news reports were not very flattering, what they had to say about, what's going on in politics. And so I can understand why someone would want to stop these reporters from talking or delivering their story. From a censorship standpoint, for those of you who don't understand what these people were hit with, what these reporters were influenced by, you gotta brush up on your covert warfare history. In the Cold War, psychotronic weapons were in fact developed. Psychotronic, today they're called directed energy weapons. And this dominates mainstream media. Operation Mockingbird is very, very alive and well. The CIA has information on lock. If they don't want you to see it, most of the time, this information doesn't get out. But, how could this really be done, though? Some people always want to talk about implants. So let's go into the whole idea of implants.
Implantable human chips. Supporters hail the technology as a medical marvel, but critics warn that the potential risks are real.
Well, they talked about, for example, electrical hazards. This thing is by no means inert. The way it works is it actually picks up and amplifies ambient electromagnetic energy from the reader devices. And if you have one of these things in your arm and you get within range of a powerful electromagnetic field, it can actually burn you.
Oh, and by the way, it can kill you if you get out of line. A closer look at the who and the why behind this idea.
All right, this next story may sound like something out of, a Hollywood thriller. A Saudi inventor has created a killer microchip. It's designed to track terrorists and criminals and, well, you can think of somebody. Not only does it include a GPS device, it also has a lethal dose of cyanide, which can be activated at any time. You get my point? The inventor's bid for a patent has been rejected in Germany. Joining us now this morning to talk about it, Jake Ward, deputy editor of Popular Science. Okay, this is pretty macabre, pretty sinister and nefarious. How exactly would this work?
Well, there's a category of technology that involves GPS tracking systems being shrunk down to the size where you could actually implant it surgically. And we've seen a number of applications for this. This is without question the most sinister version of it that I've certainly heard of. And the notion of tracking criminals is not new, but the notion of killing them remotely, I think, is a whole new thing.
Yeah, and Germany says, look, we're not going to approve this.
That's
because for that very purpose. And apparently, in some of the paperwork in applying for the patent, you could track fugitives from justice, terrorists, illegal immigrants, criminals, political opponents, defectors, and Saudi Arabians who don't return home from pilgrimage. It's a little bit wild.
I agree. I mean, the thing about this kind of patent is Germany has very tight laws about making sure that you're not registering something that really is just a bad idea, a scary idea. And in this case, this guy obviously has some very strong feelings about what it would be used for, but it just seems a little outlandish.
Yeah. Well, terrorist groups might be interested. I'm sure they'd be happy to grant their own form of a patent for that.
As fun as the idea of being implanted with microchips are, that's actually not how it works. As far as mind control or anything like that is concerned, not to get too much back into the conspiracy realm, because I'm just speaking the facts. I always speak the facts, so I research. Journalist, researcher, I wear many hats, so conspiracy theorist is not one of them. Now, the CIA definitely used to kidnap lots of people, getting black bagged, and implanting them for mind control. So, with that said, people started complaining about the radio signals and these sort of things, and microchips have been found in people, lots of people. Now, these people have been brainwashed into thinking they were abducted by aliens. That's a whole other documentary by itself, by the way. But back to the point. This is not how it's done anymore. The people can't understand that you're not microchipped. Target individuals who swear up and down that you're microchipped, I would say about 99% of you are not microchipped. I mean, it really depends on your age. For you older individuals out there, there's a few of you floating out there with CIA microchips in you. But it's not how it's done today. See, we're all nanochipped.
Then how many electrodes would you have to stick into your brain, though?
None.
None? Surely you're joking.
You go in from the inside.
And so the possibility occurred to me actually, that it would be very intriguing to use the holes that are already present in the brain to get to the brain without actually having to go through the skull.
Rodolfo Llinás is really one of the giants in the field of neuroscience. I have friends that actually are neuroscientists, and when they heard that I was working with Rodolfo, they couldn't believe it. Actually, they said, "Wow, how is that possible?"
And the holes that I'm talking about are the holes produced by the fact that the brain has vessels, which basically bring oxygen to the brain, may be used as pathways into the brain.
Essentially, we are going to make wires that are smaller than the diameter of blood cells, and we're going to thread them up through the vascular system from a catheter that's been inserted in your leg all the way up into your brain, into the smallest capillaries, the smallest blood vessels there, where the electrodes can be very close to the nerve cells in your brain without requiring major surgery to open your skull up and shove the electrodes into the surface.
So 500 nanometers is very small. If you think of it, that's about 100 times less than the thickness of your hair. How do you push the electrode to the brain?
So what you do is you actually send a certain number of them. You have a bundle, and then the bundle would be, the nanowires would be allowed to float into the bloodstream until they can go no further. At the moment, we can wire a rat. We can leave the the electrodes in the spinal cord. We want to know, if we do so, how long do the wires continue to work properly. We're talking about 5 years worth of very basic research that needs to be done. Implement something known as man-machine interface. If you can stimulate the brain, you can stimulate vision, you can stimulate auditory cortex, you can stimulate movement, you can stimulate your passions, you can stimulate desires, you can basically address your brain directly. What else can you do? Well, you can, of course, in principle, communicate with another person directly. Not only just your thoughts, but in principle, your feelings. So if you can get very close to somebody, you can get into their minds, and vice versa. Now, the implications of that are pretty obvious. It may be a mutual situation, or it may be a one direction. Somebody gets into your brain, into your mind.
The National Security Agency, the NSA, visited us, and these guys they sort of have a mystique, being members of the intelligence community. You know, the people who came are very smart. They're dressed in suits that cost more than I make in a year. I think some of their interest is potentially sinister.
So, pure fantasy, you can imagine a group of people doing a job in the military, becoming continuously aware of their existence and what they're doing. So suddenly you have not a human, but a group of people that behave as a single entity. We could call this something like a wolf pack. You would have a collective consciousness, a collective understanding. You would be basically a rather strange new device.
We'll be able to do things that we can't even imagine right now in so little time that one person could do the work of 20. But at the same time, there are other concerns. If we're able to interface directly with the brain this way, what's to say that the device you're using isn't reading your mind or controlling it? So I think there's a delicate balance that has to be made between how much any device that we connect to the brain is there to help us and how much it's there to monitor or control us. We should be controlling things. Things should not be controlling us.
The downside is, of course, very clear. You begin to lose your individuality. We will be evolving into a rather different social entity. At the moment we negotiate. At the moment our relations are mostly saying what we want other people to hear. We think other people. And we, of course, hide many aspects of what we're thinking. That's, in fact, the basis for politics, the basis for negotiations of any type. It is, therefore, very important for some people not to be totally transparent.
I think that's going to be a big change in the way we interact with reality.
The idea of being able to wire people's brains together in this way to give us the ability to directly beam our thoughts to one another sounds like science fiction. It really does. But basically right now we have proof of concept of a number of these things.
I mean, man-machine interface obviously is one of the things that is going to happen. Absolutely.
I want you guys not to have a complete and total freak out, because it's not that time to freak out quite yet. I'm not done giving up the information. But I want to take a little bit of a break here in this information, because there are going to be chemtrail deniers. They actually exist. People who can look up into the sky, see the chemtrails, and say that they're not there. Enjoy this clip.
One of the conspiracy theories that just won't seem to quit is this idea that's out there that the government is spraying chemicals out of the backside of airplanes to control the population or change the climate or test weapons, or infuse us all with Viagra, or create a race of half-human, half-monkey hybrids. I don't know, there's a lot of different theories. It's easy to generate all these different theories when you have no evidence to base any of this on. And that idea is out there, and it's called chemtrails, these contrails in the air of white evaporated materials and that sort of thing. People believe there are sinister backgrounds to it. A lot of people believe that these are real. In fact, 17% of respondents back in 2011 in an international survey said they believed the existence of a secret large-scale atmospheric spraying program to be true or partly true. 17%, that is literally millions and millions of Americans believing that it exists without any evidence whatsoever. However, it turns out that people reading conspiracy theory websites aren't the only ones with information to bear on this subject. There are actually scientists who study this sort of thing, who study the atmosphere, and now there's a study to leverage their expertise. The study, published by Environmental Research Letters, found that the two groups of experts surveyed, atmospheric chemists who specialize in condensation trails and geochemists working on atmospheric deposition of dust and pollution, overwhelmingly rejected the notion that such a program exists. Out of 77 participating scientists, 76 said they found zero evidence of a secret spraying program, adding that any evidence supposedly cited by those who subscribe to the chemtrail theory could be explained away by poor data sampling and/or normal contrails.
The Republicans have had some real knuckleheads as the head of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Now, the last one was actually a guy named Ralph Hall. He was, of course, from Texas, and he had these brilliant things to say. Why does he think that human beings have not contributed to climate change? He said, well, that's because, quote, he doesn't think we can control what God controls. Well, there you have it. That's the guy that was the head of the Science Committee. I don't know, man. Rockets going up into space and NASA. Well, God controls that. We can't control that. I don't know what you're talking about, right? I mean, under that logic, doesn't God control everything? So shouldn't you just pack up the whole committee? Which probably they would love. Ralph Hall also said, hey, that he wasn't worried about global warming. He said, quote, I'm really more fearful of freezing. Okay, but how does that relate to the rest of us? And he said, I'm also afraid of snakes on a plane. And then when they said, hey, wait a minute, you're afraid of freezing, but what difference does that make to the rest of us? He said, well, quote, I don't have any science to prove that. In other words, my concerns about global freezing are unfounded. By the way, I am at the head of the Science Committee. But don't worry, guys, because we have a new head of the Science Committee after the elections. And it's this gentleman. No, this gentleman. His name is Lamar Smith. He's going to be a lot more reasonable. So I'm sure he believes in science. 98% of the scientists believe in climate change and that it is that human beings are contributing to it. Well, so let's find out if that's the case. This is him talking about so-called ClimateGate and the media coverage of it.
Their reporting was largely slanted in favor of global warming alarmists. The networks have shown a steady pattern of bias on climate change. During a 6-month period, 4 out of 5 network news reports failed to acknowledge any dissenting views about global warming, according to a Business and Media Institute study. The network should tell Americans the truth rather than hide the facts.
So he is not concerned about global warming or climate change. He's concerned that the networks are not covering the 2% of bought scientists enough. The ones that represent the oil industry and the gas and coal industries. And, these scientists, they're probably making all this stuff up. The new head of the Science Committee. Now, why does Lamar Smith think that stuff? Well, I might have a couple ideas as to why he would think that. For example, last year he received $10,000 from Koch Industries. Now remember, these guys are bought off fairly cheaply. It's always shocking how little gets them to change their vote. But that's not as big a deal as what he has received over his career from oil and gas industry, which is $500,000. So this is how the Republican Party works. You pay us bribes, and in return, we put in charge of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee guys who do not believe in science or technology and probably don't even believe in space. Our politics is so corrupt. It's crazy.
hamper the ability to create new jobs.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking you to stop and think. And what is the conservative solution to this? It's to put a price on carbon.
President Obama on November 14th said temperatures around the globe, or the temperature around the globe is increasing faster than was predicted even 10 years ago. Yet, an article in The Economist in March 2013, and I quote, said temperatures have not really risen over the last 10 years. A month earlier, the BBC News reported that since 1998, there has been an unexplained standstill in the heating of the Earth's atmosphere. This is largely correct, right? That temperatures have remained flat over the last 10, 15 years.
No, the rate of increase has been lower, and it's not unexplained. There's a natural Pacific decadal oscillation, and the Pacific tropical temperature has not warmed during that period, and that's affected the global temperature.
Let me ask just a final question. Mr. Brune, Dr. Hansen, are you both familiar with a fellow named Patrick Moore?
Yes.
So he was the founder of Greenpeace, correct?
And disavowed by them 3 decades ago.
Well, he's disavowing them as well. He said that he left the group because he said the group became more interested in politics than science and had taken a sharp turn to the political left. But he made the statement, he said, we do not know whether the present pause in temperature will remain for some time or whether it will go up or down at some time in the near future. What we do know with extreme certainty is that climate is always changing between pauses and that we are not capable with our limited knowledge of predicting which way it will go next. I live in Wisconsin. You know, there were I think 200-foot thick glaciers in Wisconsin. How do you explain the climate change before man ever had a carbon footprint? How do you explain that climate change?
The statement that you just made is blatantly false. How do you explain
climate change that occurred 10,000 years ago before man had a carbon footprint? How do you explain that?
Climate, there are variations in the Earth's orbital elements. The eccentricity of the Earth's orbit, the time in the season at which it's closest to the sun.
So those variations just end right now, so now it's all man-made?
No, no one has said it is all man-made.
Well,
there are natural...
kind of the tack that most environmentalists take.
The man-made effect is now dominant, and we can measure that because we can measure the energy balance of the planet, and we see that there's more energy coming in and it is going out. So therefore, the planet is going to continue to get warmer. It doesn't mean each year is going to get warmer because there are natural fluctuations. But this decade is going to be warmer than the last one, and the following one will be still warmer.
I agree with Ms. Harbert. I think the science is far from settled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives. Now, I could go on and on and on and on about the things that fascinate me, but rather than talk about them, I thought I'd stop here.
Hey, you guys want to know what causes global warming? I'm going to tell you, it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. Yeah, and hey, if you ask me who this guy was at the beginning of that clip, this talk show host, or if that's what he was, if you ask me who he is, I don't know. I have no idea. I just ran across that absurdity and I had to blanket that video over the evidence that he said that did not exist. And the CIA director at the end, who actually came out and admitted that chemtrails existed. Okay, it exists. Even though it's 20 years later, I've been looking at these chemtrails for actually over 20 years. I've noticed them being sprayed when I was 6 years old. Okay, I don't need the CIA director to validate my reality for me. How about you? But I know some of you think that nanoparticulates are science fiction, nanotechnology is science fiction. Well, anyone can synthesize nanotechnology, nanoparticulates. You can do it in your own garage. Got the right equipment. This guy did it.
Since high school, I've been fascinated by carbon nanotubes and have been trying to grow them. There are loads of papers that talk about using a high amperage arc between two graphite rods to generate the carbon nanotubes. In fact, this is one of the first ways they were readily synthesized, and how I initially tried to make them back in high school. Most methods require the arc be made in a partial vacuum with helium. And I tried this, but since I was unable to adjust the rods, I couldn't strike the initial arc, and I was worried that even if I could, it could cause the chamber to shatter and implode. Then I stumbled onto a paper that talked about the same procedure, but they performed it in deionized water, just in air. This struck me as being far easier, so I decided to give it a try. I built a little stand using PVC and used one of my rewound microwave oven transformers to generate the high current. This turned out to be a major dud. There wasn't nearly enough amperage, so the arc it produced was tiny. And while I'm sure that some carbon nanotubes probably formed, the amount was so minuscule that it wasn't enough to care about. So I rewound another transformer to be a bit higher voltage, and this worked much better. I could see a spot on the rods that are noticeably darker, and an iridescent film formed on the surface of the
Summarize it, in an attempt to debunk this conspiracy theory as I thought it was, I didn't debunk it. It literally changed my life. Like I said, this is hard for me because it's not easy standing here and telling my story.
Can you go into the details of exactly what you saw?
Yeah, basically to summarize it, part of my job was to know everything that was going on in the military and what type of impact that might have on human health, and then the environmental aspects and impacts. What chemicals are we using? How are we disposing of it? Kind of cradle to grave. So we were the internal compliance people for following OSHA and EPA standards. One part of that process was to approve chemicals, hazardous materials. You know, what are you using? Why do you need it? Where's it being used? And tracking that disposal. After it being brought to my attention about chemtrails or geoengineering, I used to think it was crazy. It actually was disrespectful to my line of work because here we are trying to prevent environmental aspects and impacts and not have anybody get sick from our operations. But in an attempt to debunk, it changed my life. I started noticing things. I started noticing large quantities on the system where I would approve chemicals that did not have a manufacturer name, wasn't tied to a building, and that was normal protocol. When I started asking questions, I slowly became demonized. A couple years passed after that. When I asked again and people realized I was kind of being more vocal about it on social media, I was starting to be thrown into a mental institution and have my daughter taken away. That changed my life. I no longer view the military the same way, and I feel like after 9 years of trying to uphold an oath, I'm able to do that now.
The true purpose for chemtrails? Well, I think they actually might be trying to synthesize an element that already exists.
Magnetite is a mineral, one of the 3 common naturally occurring iron oxides. It is the most magnetic of all the naturally occurring minerals on Earth. Naturally magnetized pieces of magnetite, called lodestone, will attract small pieces of iron, and this is how ancient people first noticed the property of magnetism. Biomagnetism is usually related to the presence of crystals of magnetite, which occur widely in organisms. These organisms range from bacteria to animals, where these crystals are found in the brain. These crystals are involved in magnetoception, the ability to sense the polarity or the inclination of the Earth's magnetic fields and aid in navigation of migratory animals. Magnetoception is the sense which allows an organism to detect a magnetic field to perceive direction, altitude, or location. This is an example of the homing pigeon, who can return to its home by using its ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field. Humans have an impact on so many aspects of the Earth's ecology. While wrangling with the magnetic field might seem like an activity that is out of our reach, human-induced electromagnetic noise could be a concern for migrating animals.
Magnetite, the strongest naturally magnetic material on Earth. It's already been shown that trout's facial nerves respond to electric signals when exposed to magnetic fields. So, the German team scraped some cells out of a rainbow trout's nose and put them in a microscope surrounded by magnetic coils and a rotating magnetic field. What they found is that some cells, maybe 1 in 10,000, actually spun in unison with the rotating magnetic field. These cellular magnets are tiny, but they responded to the magnetic field with about 100 times more force than the researchers predicted. The researchers theorized that these compass cells contain microscopic crystals of magnetite, or maybe some other iron-rich mineral, and that nearby nerve cells pick up their spinning and transmit that information to the fish's brain to give it directions. Very clever.
Very interesting. I think we gotta go a little bit deeper into that.
This article is entitled Magnetite, the Great Pyramid, and the Order of Our Universe. And I'm going to scroll down to start reading, and it says this. In 1992, Dr. Joseph Kirschvink of Caltech published findings that the human brain cells possess a highly magnetic mineral known as magnetite. He believed that this magnetite allowed for animals from bees to whales to navigate the Earth's magnetic field. After researching human brain tissue, he found that most regions of the brain have 5 million magnetite crystals per gram, while the tough membrane that covers the brain had 100 million crystals per gram. It is estimated that every brain on average has 7 billion magnetite crystals, weighing a total of about 1/1,000,000th of an ounce. He also found that magnetite interacts over 1 million times more strongly with the external magnetic fields than any other biological material, including iron in red blood cells. What I propose is that we are affected profoundly by our environment, and we do process invisible light energy via these magnetite crystals in our brain. What's also occurring is that the planetary magnetic field is changing substantially. The resonant frequency of the Earth has shifted significantly in recent years after remaining constant for as long as scientists have been able to measure. Therefore, is it likely that we will reorient our consciousness via the change in input to these magnetite crystals in our brain? And he also says the pineal gland, which is located roughly at the center of your head, has an abundance of magnetite crystals. The glandular structure is believed to be the receiving point of the higher mind and has been revered in subtle ways throughout history. Dr. H. Coetzee, PhD, and he is the leader in this field in the study. And I want to read what he says right here. It says, in the human brain, pyramidal cells are present and arranged in layers in the cortex of the two cerebra. The pyramidal cells act as an electrocrystal cells immersed in extracellular tissue fluids and seem to operate in the fashion of a liquid crystal oscillator in response to different light commands or light pulses, which in turn change the orientation of every molecule and atom within the body.
So what are the implications here? We know that we're being nanochipped. So what are the implications for frequency technology?
All control and signal processing electronics is contained within the radar unit, requiring only a PC or PDA as the user interface and image display. This unique electronic beam scanning technology provides up to 360-degree horizontal coverage with no moving parts, offering high reliability, configuration flexibility, and covert operation. High resolution, plus integral GPS receiver and digital compass, provide discrimination of multiple targets and accurate overlay onto a map database. A typical terrain would otherwise return a radar image which was of no use to surveillance applications, as shown in this display. But by introducing clutter filtering, the static objects are suppressed, leaving a clear display of all moving targets. False alarms due to adverse weather conditions and animals are minimized by adjustable sensitivity thresholds and Doppler filtering. Location, speed, and direction of travel are identified by combining the radar data with the inbuilt GPS receiver and digital compass, and once highlighted by the Blighter radar, targets can be inspected by a security camera. The Doppler frequency shift induced by moving targets can be used to differentiate various target types. The distinct audible whine from a vehicle target, with its high frequency content, is readily distinguishable from the more rhythmic tone from a human target. This may be subaudible at slow speed, yet still identifiable electronically. These differing sounds can be interpreted by the operator or by an automatic target recognition system. The blue background image is the clutter map caused by static objects such as buildings and trees. Moving objects are clearly displayed, each colour-coded according to its speed, and with the facility to show the track of the target over a period of time. Optimized for easy, semi-skilled operation, there is a comprehensive set of menus that can be configured by the system manager. The clutter map may be suppressed to more clearly highlight the moving targets. Touchscreen zoom and pan controls enable inspection of key target areas. Targets may be selected to display data on their range, bearing, velocity and typical size, all very useful for the categorizing of the target type. Key to target identification is the Doppler shift caused by its motion, and selecting a target of interest enables the operator to listen to this audio signature and identify the various target types. Alert zones can be introduced around critical areas, such that an alarm is triggered if an object moves into them. Here we define an alert zone at a crossroad junction, and as a vehicle enters the zone, it changes colour and an audible alarm is triggered to alert the operator. Scanning enables a wide range of fixed installations and easy integration on security observation towers alongside cameras and lighting equipment.
A bipartisan report from the Senate has blasted now a Homeland Security intelligence program, calling it useless and costly effort that tramples on civil liberties. The Department of Homeland Security, yes indeed, created dozens of so-called fusion centers. What are fusion centers? Well, they're set up to share intelligence across multiple departments, and they came about in the aftermath of the attacks of 9/11. Fusion centers. Sounds awesome, right? According to the bipartisan Senate investigation, the program found no potential terrorist activity, none, and often spied on innocent Americans. Department of Homeland Security spying on innocent Americans? Oh my goodness. And the cost? Up to $1 billion. The report indicates, and I quote, the subcommittee investigation found that the fusion centers often produced irrelevant, useless, and/or inappropriate intelligence reporting to DHS, and many produced no intelligence reporting whatsoever. A Homeland Security spokesman blasts the report in a statement and says, quote, the committee report on federal support for fusion centers is out of date, inaccurate, and misleading. With us now, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. $1 billion plus to spy on innocent Americans. Welcome to the new normal.
Right. It is the new normal, unfortunately, Shep. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security says it doesn't know how much money it spent, and it puts it at a range between $300 million and $1 billion. The Senate committee, which was signed by more Democrats than Republicans, says that $1.4 billion has been spent, that the Senate committee counted a different number of fusion centers than DHS claims it has, and that they were more dedicated to the lawless, unconstitutional violation of civil liberties by spying on people without getting search warrants than they were to developing legitimate intelligence which would help secure our freedom or our safety. Now, some of this people have been complaining about for a long time. Now we have the United States Senate saying the complaints are true. These are rogue law enforcement people serving no good, just becoming spies.
Did they forget what their directive was? Did they forget what they were supposed to do and just get all caught up in the power of being able to look down on people and see what they're doing?
Well, the directive was to enable state and local and federal intelligence and law enforcement to exchange information so that the right hand would know what the left hand was doing. But the information that they chose to exchange had next to nothing to do with national security. There was not a single meaningful allegation or indictment or prosecution for national security that came out of this. In fact, because these were federal centers, they were frequently manned by local law enforcement from a different locality. Some of these guys got bored and decided to go out on the road and enforce local laws, and suddenly they found out they weren't authorized to do so in those states. That frustrated local law enforcement because these guys were bored in the fusion centers.
This is the same Department of Homeland Security that once told us to shrink wrap our homes to keep the threat to a minimum. I'm sure people forget about that sort of thing from time to time, but is it your understanding that there is absolutely no uprising to try and do something about this government behemoth of some 90,000 plus employees?
Well, there should be an uprising now. You have Senator Lieberman, though leaving the Senate, an independent Democrat, and John McCain causing quite a stir. I don't know if anything will happen in an election year for the duration of this Congress.
I can answer that.
But I think that something will happen soon.
Well, we hope so. Are they going to run out of money? We already ran out of money, though, didn't we?
Oh, they don't know how much money they spent, Shep.
Yeah, how would they know? I mean, please.
So, the technology that the government has, well, it's not being used for anything good. No terrorists have been caught. No crime has been stopped. No terrorist attacks, no shootings, no anything. So, this huge drain on the American people who pay their taxes, what gives this for? Besides creating totalitarian Big Brother state. Well, that's the question. And in my research, I have found the answers.
So if she said the future out loud,
The future.
we have the signal that's corresponding to that muscular activity. But with subvocal speech, she doesn't have to move her mouth. She could say that word silently. So she would say the future silently. Here she said the future, but she didn't move her lips. And you can see that there's still the same signal being picked up by the electrodes underneath her throat.
Once the electrodes capture the signal, they can be transmitted, as if through a cell phone, to someone with an earpiece receiver.
In Chicago, Illinois, a world authority on microwave hearing shows how it could work.
I'm hearing a microwave pulse like a click. Now it sounds like a chirp with a tonal quality to it.
Professor James Lynn is hearing sounds that aren't there. But he's not crazy. Pulses of microwave energy are being generated and fired at him from behind.
Microwaves can be heard depending on the individual, depending on the hearing acuity of the individual. Individuals with a fairly normal hearing can hear microwaves at quite a low level.
The energy of the absorbed microwaves causes brain tissue to very slightly heat up and expand, causing a pressure wave to be picked up by the hearing mechanism in the inner ear. Professor Lynn is far from hearing voices, but it could be possible to send coded signals to an agent this way.
Brain is an electrical organ. It is susceptible to electrical signals. Since microwave is electrical, therefore, in principle, one could embed or encode information in the microwave.
There have been recent advances in acoustic technology which can transmit sound great distances with a very narrow target range. The long-range acoustic device is one such technology and is currently employed by both military and commercial sea vessels to deter potential attackers. In San Diego, California, Woody Norris, developer of the LRAD, describes another of his acoustic technologies known as hypersonic sound.
It's kind of like radio stations, except in this case, you don't need a receiver. To hear a radio station, I gotta have a receiver. With this, the mixing actually happens in the air, and you hear it without any other device. So if I aim it at you, and it happens to hit both of your ears, and I'm reluctant to say this, it'll be as though the sound is inside your head. This time I'll come all the way around in case you're getting a lot of echo from the room.
The observation of the phenomena came way back during the Second World War, and the radar operators, accidentally noticed that when they stand in front of the radar, sometimes they can hear clicks in their head. Somebody by the name of Alan Fry, who had talked to some of the radar operators based on their report, and he conducted a very simple laboratory experiment, indeed showed that human beings can hear the radar pulses. They were not just making it up. In ordinary sound perception, sound that goes into the ear canal gets amplified by the small bones in the middle ear, and then gets to the inner ear where the cochlea resides, and in the cochlea is converted to electrical impulse. But fundamentally, the physical phenomenon that enables it is mechanical movement of particles. So the mechanical wave transmitted by the bones of the middle ear gets converted at the inner ear into the electrical impulses. But in the case of a microwave auditory effect, the source is electromagnetic. So if you expose the biological tissue to a pulse of microwave energy, the tissue expands and induces a vibration. Instead of going through the middle ear, the microwave-induced vibration gets propagated to the inner ear directly, and at the inner ear is converted to electrical impulses again. And in this case, a vibration in the human tissue, if the tissue is the head, for example, will fall within the auditory range of a human subject. People now are talking about actually direct communication. Like we mentioned, sending a message through the air to a person without anybody else being aware of it. That is within the realm of possibility. I don't know whether it is true or not. I think there's a sizable number of people who think this is being used for mind control. I think if somebody who wants to do it, there is the potential.
D.C. police have recently had to deal with some crowd control situations involving violent teenagers. Now a controversial noise device just may do some work for them. Let's find out more from our own Brian Todd. Brian.
Wolf, this Gallery Place section of Washington is very popular with young people because of all the trendy bars and restaurants around here. But recently, property managers have complained about loitering. Property managers have placed this device up on the wall right next to the metro station. This is called a mosquito. It emits a high-pitched sound designed to keep loiterers away. But the question is, does it unfairly target young people? It can cause a high-pitched headache, and that's by design. Just outside the Gallery Place subway stop in Washington, the mosquito beeps often. But is it indiscriminate? This anti-loitering device was placed here after a big street brawl. But the property managers and the mosquito's distributor both tell CNN the noisemaker doesn't target young people. Still, the distributor says teenagers happen to do the most loitering. And he says the sound is most effective for the stage of life when humans can hear the highest pitches.
The mosquito, when activated, emits a sound at 17.5 kilohertz, which is at the high end of the youth hearing range, 13 to 25-year-old hearing range. When a youth hears the sound, they find it extremely annoying and will leave the area in a few minutes.
At Gallery Place, we saw some young people getting irritated.
Probably wouldn't shop at any of these shops if I heard it again. Why not? It's too annoying. It gave me a headache.
There are settings on the mosquito that can be heard by older age groups. I played the sound off a computer in our newsroom near several people in their 20s, 30s, and older. I didn't tip them off beforehand. On settings for people 25, 30, 35, and younger, no one reacted. Then, we're going to play a setting now for people 50 years old and under. Oh, I heard that. I can hear that too. Still, some believe this device does target teenagers unfairly. Among the community leaders who have concerns about this device, Judith Sandelow of the Children's Law Center here in the Gallery Place area. Judith, if there are problems with violence and loiterers driving away customers from businesses that count on that business in this area, wouldn't any little thing like this help?
I'm sympathetic to businesses needing to be able to engage the most customers in the best possible way. I'm sympathetic to that. This isn't the best solution. We need to have better programs for youth. We need to engage them in activities.
Believe it or not, young people have been able to use this device to their advantage. We're told by the distributor that that high-pitched sound that it emits has made its way onto the internet. He says that young people have been able to download that noise onto their cell phones to use as ringtones, so that when their cell phones ring, they can hear it, but their parents and their teachers cannot.
It's now time for On Cape from the newsroom of the Cape Cod Times in Hyannis, Massachusetts. And today we're talking about a teen repellent that's called the mosquito. It's an interesting story. And joining us from the Cape Cod Times is Sean Gonsalves. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Leslie.
I had never heard of this. What is the mosquito?
A mosquito is this piece of technology. It's like a little speaker box. And Marjorie and Sparrow, and Bob Sparrow, her husband, who owned this hot chocolate sparrow down here, they heard it on the NPR, the show about a year ago, where it emits this frequency that you have to be between the ages of 12 and 25 to hear, apparently. Apparently, as you get older, I mean, this isn't really a surprise, I guess, if you think about it, but as you get older, certain frequencies are inaudible to older people. And so it plays this frequency, and it only extends out about 30 to 50 feet, they say. They play it for a few minutes, and apparently it drives teenagers crazy, and it drives them away.
Because it's an unpleasant sound.
Right, the screeching sound, kind of like nails on a chalkboard, I guess. I mean, I may look a little young, but I'm too old to hear it. I can't hear it. It could be playing right now.
I couldn't hear it either, Sean. What's the point? To keep, I assume they want business, so when do they turn this thing on?
They do. They say that they only turn it on after 11 when they close, and they're there for about an hour afterwards. This parking lot is a hangout spot for teenagers after hours sometimes. Police have said that they've had as many as 3 dozen teenagers hanging out. They've had some incidences of vandalism and things like that. So the owners claim that they haven't used it in a few months, but they play it at night just to keep people away after hours. And apparently, it doesn't project into the store, and it doesn't affect young ears or older ears. So, but here on the Cape, it's one of these stories that I'm sure people will talk about because it sort of adds to this, what young people would say is this unfriendly environment. There's a couple of towns on Cape where things close between 1 and 3, whether it's off-road vehicles or hanging out, there always seems to be this effort to shoo people along. Although the Cape Cod Mall says, hey, we want you guys to come hang out in the mall, of course.
They're not going to put up a mosquito. Is it legal? What does the police department have to say about it?
Well, the police department was surprised. Apparently it is legal. The company that makes it, Kids Be Gone, they say that it has no harmful effects. The Orleans police chief actually said he knew nothing about it, but that it helped explain why they weren't getting as many calls to the parking lot at night.
Kids Be Gone is the company.
That's right. They're out of England.
That's interesting. And so adults wouldn't even know when the thing is turned on. They have to ask a group of teenagers.
Right. And this technology, it kind of, it's a two-edged sword. Kids may get annoyed by it, but on the other hand, apparently there's these cell phone ringtones that you can download, young people can download, that only they can hear ring. So
isn't that convenient? So the parents
exactly.
don't even know when the phone's ringing.
Yep.
We're getting old, Sean.
That's what it is.
So, very disturbing stuff. Fusion centers, and among other different types of agencies working together. These are the people who are responsible for targeted individuals. They're responsible for the tinfoil hat conspiracy. Okay? Voices in people's heads. This is actually old CIA technology. Very old. 1970s old. And I'm very disturbed because I went deeper into my research and connected the dots. These people, I hate to call them people, they're really just psychopathic flesh bots. People who lack any character, who feel superior to you and want to sit above you when they are the lowliest scum on the planet. These people are using this type of technology for their child sex rings. Sounds that only children can hear. Any age group, they're letting you know. Okay? You ever wonder why a lot of children don't speak out against their molesters? They're being harassed with voice-to-skull technologies, constant voices in their heads if they choose to speak out. A lot of people have actually come up underneath this sort of program. Children, sex slaves to government officials, military, and in politics are undergoing torture from voice to skull. Because after all, parents and teachers can't hear this noise. So, victims suppressed. Information about the victims suppressed. I wonder how many children who have listened to these voices have gone and picked up a gun, given directions to go and pick up mommy or daddy's gun out of the closet or wherever, instructed to load the gun and kill themselves with it, all for the sake of gun control. These government officials, these government agents, the whole system has a hand in this. It's disgusting. And I want to thank you guys for watching this movie, this unfinished version of the movie. I hope you enjoyed the red carpet premiere. And, well, the final full release will be released on November 5th. Please be sure to share the movie everywhere that you can. This will help save humanity. Thank you.